This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we have Nick Pittinger, Vice President of Data Services at Decisive, back with us. Nick, great to see you.
Good to see you as well, Jason.
So always love these because you do a great job of sharing some really exclusive data with us on the service side of the truck industry. And right now we're looking at the second quarter of 2024. Now, we saw a bit of a dip here in the Decisive SRM platform that was used to manage. It was 3.5 fewer service transactions here in the second quarter of 2024. What do you attribute that to? Is it an indication of freight volume decreases, lower miles, newer vehicles? How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both there. You know, we kind of feel that the smaller number is an indication that freight volume decreases continue to impact that mileage. At the same time, as supply chain challenges are steadily resolved, fleets are continuing to add new vehicles, which would then require fewer repairs. For example, quarter over quarter in Q2 2024, the number of service operations, as you mentioned, dropped on the platform by 3.5%. However, increases were realized in both Q1 2024 at 9.5% increase, as well as Q4 2023, 2.8%. So that's kind of looking quarter over quarter for the previous two. So there was a raise before. Yes, it's kind of like dropped or flattened out, you could say. But when we look year over year in Q2 2024, the service activity year over year was up actually 7.3%. And, again, a similar increase in the previous quarter, Q1 2024, where there was year over year growth of 8%. So this quarter, we're seeing early indications that freight volume trend may be reversing a little bit due to activity in a couple of key areas. One was specifically around tires, and secondarily was around activity around wheels, rims, hubs, and bearings. While tires were only up slightly at 0.3%, they were significantly up for the quarter at 15.7%. For wheels, activity is up 16.4% for the quarter. So these are two areas that we're going to be continuing to keep our eye on.
Right, and I'm gonna do my thing and speculate a little too, because if we're looking at quarters, we're looking at Q4, we're looking at Q1, maybe some seasonality there too, because we also saw them going. We're moving kind of into the spring months and into the summer months here in the second quarter. If we can kind of time travel back a little. And the highest single increase quarter over quarter service activity in the latest numbers were air conditioning, heating, and ventilating systems. And the highest single decrease was fuel systems. Do you see that as a reflection of the seasonality there?
Absolutely, Jason. This is clearly a recurring seasonal trend. We've seen it in some of the past couple of years as we've been doing this and reviewing the data. For air conditioning specifically, we saw a 71.8% increase in that quarter over quarter activity going from Q1 into Q2. While in Q4 2023, so kind of looking back a little bit, we saw the exact opposite with a 42% decrease in activity. So it kind of points to the seasonality aspect, as you mentioned, as the summer months come along, people want to make sure that their AC and things are working properly before the heat starts hitting them. But then, when it starts getting colder towards the end of the year, there's less work on that particular area of the assets. As you mentioned, we also see some similar trends with fuel systems, and I'd probably add cooling systems to the mix as well. Oh, sure. For fuel systems, we saw an 18.9% decrease in Q2 activity, while the previous two quarters saw increases of 25% in Q1 and 18% in Q4 of 2023. So again, kind of seeing that little swell going through. For cooling systems, we saw a 12.6% decrease in Q2 activity. However, similar to air conditioning, we saw the exact opposite trend in Q4 2023 with a 17% increase. So kind of seeing those, a couple of these different systems, kind of shift based on the timing of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's kind of a cool takeaway for fleet managers, too, when you talk about that seasonal PMs and when to do that, maybe that uptake in the air conditioning and HVAC system. This isn't, it's not a bad thing. It's getting those trucks ready for those summer months, as you indicated, too. So kind of being able to follow the trends. If you aren't taking care of that and you are having to deal with that later in the summer, maybe a good note to back that up there in the Q2 PMs. So we're going to go into my favorite topic here, because year over year, Q2 2024, one of the most sizable increases was transmission service, which includes automatic and automated manual transmissions. We have been tracking this one now. I feel bad, almost gleefully announcing this, because that means more service on the fleet side. But that's a trend that we have been tracking since you and I have started looking at this data here on a regular basis. What's going on with transmission service from the data side?
Sure. So year over year in Q2 2024, there are increases in service activity in the Decisive SRM platform for 20 of the 25 VMRS system codes. That was up from 15 out of the 25 in our previous analysis in Q1. The most sizable of those increases, as you mentioned, was a 53.8% jump in service for transmission main manual, while we also saw a 16.8% jump year over year in transmissions main automatic. So for transmission automatics, this is probably due to the steady increase of their growing use in the industry. We've mentioned it on some of the past conversations that, we're following that trend. We're seeing it more and more on the assets that are coming in for service. Volume in each of the previous 4 quarters have gone up in that 4 to 6% range for that automatic transmission. And it's interesting to note that it was basically flat quarter over quarter this most recent quarter with that trend. We're also seeing twice as many operations associated with the automatic transmissions versus the manual transmissions, roughly around 16,000 operations versus 8,000 for the manual transmission. This ratio we talked about a little bit last time, it's still holding while the number of operations for both continue to increase.
Yeah, really interesting there, and good for fleets to know, especially given that those older trucks are getting into their second and third lives with those automated manual transmissions, just to earmark maintenance money for that, because those issues do come up. Paired with the transmission is the engine, and engine is always a big talking point. Anything there that the data tea leaves are telling us in terms of engine-related service issues that fleet managers should keep an eye on?
These, power plant is one of the ones that's kind of traditionally there at the top of our list. It's continuing to rank highest in volume in Q2. Power plant service activity has held that top spot across all 4 age brackets since Q4 2023. And exhaust system is another one that has continued to rank highly on that list. That one's been ranked second in all but the newest vehicles. In Q2, about 19% of all operations were power plant related, and accounted for the highest volume of service activity among those 25 VMRS systems tracked by Decisive. And power plant continues to deliver the largest impact due to not only its volume of service activity, but also its share of the costs. Also in the top 5 systems based on service activity were exhaust at 11% of all operations. Last time we met, I mentioned that we'd be monitoring Q2 activity related to steering due to several OEMs having announced recalls related to steering control around possible issues with tie rods and ball studs. We did see a noticeable year-over-year increase of 18.6% in that steering category as well. Last to note, there was also a recall in May on gear shifter communication with the transmission. We didn't see any significant activity related to this recall just yet, but we plan to kind of check back on this when we have our Q3 data together. So I know it kind of strayed a little bit from power plant itself, but really just kind of talking about what were the things that seemed to be, moving, things we were tracking from last time, and areas that we may want to continue to look at next time around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you did. I had forgotten about the steering issue in the recall there, and it'll be, like you said, interesting to see if those numbers continue to climb, if more fleets are coming in for that here in the third quarter, now that we're in the fourth quarter, and just being able to track some of those recalls. So glad you brought that up. One of the other things that you brought up last time that was a surprise to me, or I was surprised to see, was cab and sheet metal service. What is the update on that? Is service going up there, and is that still an age of fleet issue?
Quarterly activity for the cab and sheet metal has been holding relatively steady with only about a 3.9% decrease. However, we see a fairly noticeable increase in activity on a year-over-year basis with an 11.7% increase in that cab and sheet metal category. For the second quarter in a row of Q2 2024, cab and sheet metal service volume held the second spot among the newest vehicles and the third highest level of activity in the 3 to 6 year age bracket. In the 6 to 9 years and 9+ years bracket, it accounts for the 4th highest amount of service volume. So kind of follows that trend that I think we've discussed in the past where, early age of those vehicles, people are focusing on, the cab and sheet metal stuff, making sure their trucks look nice and things that are probably covered under warranty here and there. But then, as the assets begin to age, they'll focus more on those, areas of the vehicle that are more relevant for keeping it on the road and generating revenue. Looking back at some of the previous quarters, I think it'd be fun to make some predictions for what we may see in the upcoming Q3 data. You touched on a little bit of like, hey, what do we expect to see? Seasonality a little bit earlier on the call.
Right.
Thinking about Q3, in the past, service activity has remained relatively flat going from Q2 to Q3. Not a lot of the categories really change all that much in their volumes. And I don't expect this to be any different for 2024. We'll see if there are any surprises, maybe something around the recall activity that we discussed. But I don't expect that we see anything significantly up or down, especially since we don't see those usual seasonal trends that we talked about, probably until like Q4, when we'll likely see things like fuel system and cooling systems activity increasing, while AC, heating, and ventilating systems drastically decreasing. Let's see how I did next time we meet up.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I'm really excited about that because, I think this also speaks to, we've talked a lot about being able to look at data and see the trends. It takes time, right? And so being able to do that and how that would relate to fleet manager operations, I think they could take a lot out of that as well. Speaking of the future, too, so I want to back up a minute. You and I, we dive right in this because we've been doing this a while, but I do want to back up and let everybody know that this is all possible. In large part because of the VMRS data that's in Decisive. And I know Decisive has a really cool automated VMRS encoding process. Can you tell me about that and any plans for expanding that usage?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yes, we're always looking at ways to improve service effectiveness through the quality and availability of VMRS data within our ecosystem. So just recently, we've incorporated our VMRS Code Key 31 system encoding model that we use to generate these reports. We've incorporated that directly into our platform. So this has taken the VMRS encoding population from around 10 to 15% coming from the dealers. We knew that was like a gap before, and that's why we started this process. Now that we have this encoding model in place directly into our ecosystem, that percentage has gone all the way up to 65 to 70% of the operations that are flowing through our platform. Now these values are embedded directly. They're more readily accessible to fleets and dealers alike within the Decisive SRM, as well as our suite of reports. We're also working on further refinement of the encoding model that'll continue to increase the population of this VMRS Code Key 31 system code field. We expect this enhancement to be available in early 2025.
That's super cool. So, and just so I understand, right? So that's if I'm a service location using the Decisive SRM platform, I'm putting in the service information. Maybe I'm not putting in the VMRS info, the code, the specific codes. But once I send that to the platform, then you can automatically kind of detect or encode what VMRS system that would fall under. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's correct. Yep. So, dealers are able to kind of put those codes in manually. They're able to kind of set them up when they're, kind of preloading their operations to our platform as well. So that way, when they use those operations, they would flow directly into the case if we have them kind of set up in our builder platform, which is where they can preload their operations if they know the things they do regularly. But when they don't kind of fill in those fields, either through the preloading of the operations or even when they're pulling the operations in manually into the case, our process is now running on a nightly basis to say, let's look at the operations that have been added or created over the last, window of time and be able to kind of pass them through our model and be able to see, can we put a predicted value into that Code Key 31 system field when a value doesn't exist. So again, we're still kind of looking at the dealers to be the ones that own that. And, they're going to know their business ideally better than I will or better than our model will. So if they put a value in that field, we're going to trust that to be true and we're going to leave that there. But for those situations where no value exists, we're looking at, being able to run this in an automated fashion to be able to, populate that field and bring that higher quality data to our customers directly within the system itself.
Yeah, that's very cool. I look forward to seeing how that grows even more. I look forward to seeing about the predictions when we talk here next quarter. Always great catching up with you. Happy holidays to you and yours, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Jason. You too. Have a good one.